to you, dear listeners, and welcome to Metal Gear Mondays, the most thorough Kojima-themed podcast on the internet. I am your host, Sam Wright. I'm not going to do the obvious joke, you know, the whole kept you waiting thing. I'm not going to do that because everybody, we've done it. It's over. But
kept you waiting. Huh?
We are back. Thanks, Zach. I appreciate that. We are back. It's been a little bit. It's been a while. We took our little hiatus after Christmas. We left you with an interview with Tommy Earl Jenkins, who is a darling man. And we're back with another interview with one James Horan, who is another darling man, who plays, of course, Skullface in Metal Gear Solid Ground Zeroes and Metal Gear Solid 5. We had a wonderful time talking to him, and by we, I mean Cole Duncan.
Hey, good to be back.
And Zach James.
Age hasn't slowed me down one bit.
I would disagree.
I'm the youngest in the fucking group.
I know, and that's really sad, isn't it?
I'm not going to lie, I had to stop myself because I got into a groove and I wasn't going to introduce you guys because I forgot. So I had to stop myself.
That would have been good if you don't introduce us. We're just vamping in the background.
Yeah, we're just here.
Yeah. Yep. But yeah, so we took a second to sit down with James Horan, who is a wonderful guy, had a lot of great stories to tell, blew Zach and Cole's minds at least once during the episode.
Oh yeah, no.
So you'll hear that.
Just you wait. I
cool.
geek the fuck out on air.
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
Yep, so does Cole. It's everything. I had the opportunity to geek out before the episode when I was reading through his credits, his many awesome, like, he's been in so many like crazy things. He's been in WoW, World of Warcraft, he's been in Fallout, he's been in the Batman Arkham series.
I'm honestly glad I found out like this way, like having no idea, and then just that bombshell, and like, oh my god, wait, what?
Wait, so who did he play in Fallout?
I'm not. I had it in my head a second ago, but I don't remember. I know he played Jack Ryder in the Batman Arkham games.
I'll have to look it up afterwards.
He's got a lot of like I read so many games and movies and shows and things and things that he's in.
Why is
that like
and bears?
Oh my! He's been in a lot of stuff, and so he's very prolific in the industry. He talked to us a little bit about like his background in theater and is working on all kinds of really crazy cool stuff that he's done over his time in the industry. So we thank James.
The man's had an incredible career.
Oh yes,
for sure.
And then of course we talked to him about Metal Gear and Skullface a little bit, and I think you guys are going to enjoy the episode. We get some nice little insights into James and who he is, and we enjoyed talking to him.
Yeah.
So to that end, he has a website. It's jameshoran.com. James spelled as you would expect, Horan spelled Horan. That you can find kind of his stuff there. He did mention at the end of the episode that he would like to overhaul it a little bit. I don't think he has like a social media presence that I'm aware of. I think when I was looking
I can't find it, so.
But yeah, so just pay attention. Google the name. He dropped a little bit of a fun thing on us at the end of the episode, so just keep an eye out for James in the future. And hope you enjoy the episode. You can find us on the internet, MetalGearMondays.com, where you'll find links to all of our social media. You can also, and all of our episodes again, and you can obviously find all of our episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, all those cool places. You can also go to patreon.com/MetalGearMondays, where you can choose to donate. We've gotten a lot of like a big influx of people jumping into the Discord while we've been on vacation, which is actually very funny that happened. So please come in and join that. $1 will get you there. You can also find us on Twitter. Yeah, that's right. You can find us on Twitter.
Yeah, we're there. We're there.
Monday. Wow. We've got a store, bit.ly/MGM store. yeah, there's so many other ways. One of the things that we don't mention nearly enough that we should is that you can go on Apple Podcasts and leave us a little review. We really appreciate that.
Please.
It helps us get seen. And we love to hear from you on there. And yeah, don't forget, you can also email us at any point to talk about whatever, at contact@metalgearmondays.com. And yeah, I did want to give a quick shout out. Actually, I won't discuss the contents of the message because it was a little personal, but I wanted to give a shout out to Tony Kavanaugh, who I had an interaction with on Instagram. Very cool dude, and just wanted to give him a shout out because I had a very very nice, meaningful interaction with him, and we have those sometimes. It was very kind of personal, and
awesome.
Yeah, I just want to let the people who are listening know that if you we're here, we have a social responsibility as D-list internet celebrities to kind of just be kind of like beacons for people. And I just want you guys to know that we are happy to be that. So
sure.
Anyway, that cryptic meandering path to say thanks, Tony, and thanks everybody for listening. I've rambled on a lot. Do you boys have anything to add before we to go?
Yeah, if we're doing shout outs, speaking of meaningful interactions, big shout out to my man Sean Wilkins. Got to meet up with you and your brother-in-law. Had an amazing time meeting you guys. Thank you again for all of your amazing artwork. And to kind of double down on what Sam says, we leave our tags at the end of each episode, not only for to keep up with the podcast, but if you ever feel like you need to reach out, please do. We are here. We would love to hear from you, or even if you just want to chat, that's what we're here for.
Mm-hmm. And Zach, do you have any shout outs to make? Hey, it's Sam from the past, but like the more recent past. I'm sorry I sound far away. My microphone's far away and I don't feel like moving. Also, Zach's audio cut out for some reason at like 4 minutes. So I'm going to do this part for him. You can find him on Twitter and Instagram at author Zach James. And if you care to, you can find him on YouTube at Maverick Rooster. Just search Maverick Rooster. Scroll down a little bit. You'll probably find him. He does Let's Plays with people, some friends, including Chris Hampton. He's doing a Gears of War playthrough right now with Chris. If you want to interested in looking at that, and I'm going to be playing some games with him on there soon too, so keep an eye out on Zach's YouTube channel. Anyway, back to the thing. Okay, bye. Cole, what about you? Where can they find you on the internet?
You can find me on the internet at on Instagram at Subterranean Homesick Brews, and you can find me on Twitter at I am Cole Duncan, and you can also find me on PSN at I am Cole Duncan.
Indeed, and I am Sanjul, that's Sanjuul on Twitter, and you can also find me on bit.ly/Sam Does a Thing. That's my YouTube channel. It's a little inactive at the moment. I've been very busy, but I'm hoping to get back to it soon. But I've got 5 what I think are very entertaining videos on my YouTube channel. So check those out.
Your pepper eating one was my favorite.
The pepper eating one is pretty good. Anyway, we're going to get out of here. We talked for long enough. Please enjoy this interview with Mr. James Horan.
I was born in a small village. I was still a child when we were raided by soldiers. Foreign soldiers.
We are here with one Mr. James Horan, who the listeners will know as Skullface from Metal Gear Solid 5 and Metal Gear Ground Zeroes. James, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. Let's just get right into it. So, you were born in Louisville, correct?
Correct.
What was it like growing up in Louisville, and what kind of led you down the path of acting?
Well, I had a very simple life growing up. I was raised by my mother. My dad died when I was 3. I didn't even know him, but we grew up right across from Churchill Downs, where they run the Kentucky Derby.
Oh wow!
And we didn't have a car growing up, so we walked or took the bus wherever we needed to go. it was it was very simple, like I said, but I really, I guess, in retrospect, I really appreciated the kind of small town vibe that was there. Even though Louisville is the biggest city in Kentucky, it didn't feel that way to me growing up. But I got into athletics when I was in high school, and I played football and ran track. And I did well in school, but I also liked being athletic. And then I guess in high school, I was sort of attracted to the theater. I was fascinated by it. And but it was just, everybody was a little too precious, I guess, in the theater world in high school. And I wasn't tempted really to go out for a play, or I didn't feel that that it was right for me then. But I did start. One day they put out an announcement on the over the loudspeaker in school and high school that if you wanted to help build sets at Actors Theater of Louisville, which is a pretty well-known repertory company there. On Saturday mornings, come down and get your feet wet building sets. And I thought, well, that could be interesting. So I took the bus down to Actors Theater of Louisville on the Ohio River. And I just started, getting involved in the theater world, I suppose. And I saw some professional actors there that really impressed me. Victor Jory being one of them, who was very well known. I mean, his son John Jory was got Actors Theater of Louisville going and put it on the map. He became the artistic director there, and he got Victor Jory to come and do a couple of plays before he passed. And I was able to see him on stage, and it just impressed me. I guess I saw the work I saw there really made me want to do it, but I ended up going to college in a small college in Danville, Kentucky, called Center College, and I played football and ran track there for 2 years. But then I finally went out for a play when I was 19 years old, and it was my third year in school, and you had mentioned that you jotted down that it was Marat Sade.
Yes.
I got cast as the Marquis de Sade.
Oh, wow.
Which I call my baptism by fire. I played a lot of bad guys since then. But no, it was just a fabulous experience. I think that's where the bug bit pretty hard. And I did a couple more plays in college. And then when it came time to graduate, I was an English major. And I also had I got a secondary school teaching credential because I had a high school English teacher that was very, very special to me. He was like a father figure. He was my English teacher, my German teacher, my homeroom teacher, and my track coach. He was just a great man. He was actually at my wedding before he passed.
Oh,
wow. That was great. Anyway, that's why part of me wanted to become a teacher. And so I did get secondary school training. But then when I came to graduate college, I had to decide really what I wanted to do, whether I want to continue with English but I really wanted to find out a little more about theater. So I got accepted into the University of Iowa in Iowa City in their MFA program, the Master of Fine Arts in Acting. It was a 2-year program, and I auditioned for them, and I got accepted. And I think that was where I really solidified my desire to go on, become an actor. Now that I've blathered there, you want to ask me?
That's awesome, actually.
What actually prompted you to attend the University of Iowa? I'm just curious.
Well, actually, one of my English teachers at Center College in Kentucky in undergrad. He was a University of Iowa graduate, and he spoke highly of it. And also, actually, probably more importantly, the head of the theater, a man named West Hill. He was another paternal figure to me. He was an elderly gentleman even when he was director of the theater there, and he directed me in several plays at Center, and he was also a graduate from the University of Iowa. So the two of them spoke very highly of it, and so that's what made me to try to go there. I mean, the other alternative would have been like Juilliard in New York, or
right, the obvious choices there.
Well, more of a conservatory approach, but. I don't know. I felt like I got really good training at University of Iowa. There were really good people there.
So I'm curious to know then just about sort of, you'll have to excuse me. I'm not too familiar with this side of, entertainment and all that. What was it like, sort of like getting ready for stage prep and getting ready to act on stage? Like how was that for you?
Well, stage, I don't know. I still find it the most challenging and interesting part of the craft. It's just because it's so immersive, once you step out on stage, you're on your own, and whatever happens. And that's what I just find that fascinating, because it's so much like life.
I was going to say, that sounds both exhilarating and terrifying at the same time.
Well, it is, and that's why it becomes such a drug, because it's I think a lot of actors feel that way about the craft of acting. I mean, it is a craft, I think, but that's why I've always appreciated the English school of and English actors in general, because almost all of them invariably come through the theater. And I think their work, either on stage especially on stage, but in film, the great, it seems like a lot of the fabulous villains are English. And television shows. I mean, my wife and son were just binging on Downton Abbey. And that's, I mean, they come from that background of that rich theatrical tradition. And my last year in college, actually, I got to spend a month in London seeing plays. It was a theater sort of seminar we were doing there, and that's what really solidified, I think, my desire to walk this path, because I saw some amazing actors on stage in England, in London at that time, and I'm sure even today it's still happening, but. It just, I don't know quite where I was going with that, but anyway, no, it's just that stage acting is still. I mean, I just a couple of months ago, I did a one-man show that I've done over the years. I did it again in Hollywood at a friend's little theater, and it was just fun to get it back up again and do it on, because it was. Yeah. And I've done it I did it in New York. I did it here in LA a couple of times. I've done it in just different venues in the United States, and it's about an hour, and it's just a one-man piece, and it's it takes place in a prison cell, and he's just telling his story from a prison cell.
I think next time I'm back in the United States, I'm going to have to keep an eye out for the next time you're in New York.
Well, you're in New York?
I live about an hour north of Manhattan, yeah.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I lived in New York when I was doing soap operas, and I miss the city. I want to take my wife and son back there. They still haven't been, but my kid is he's 13 now, so I think he's old enough to not be freaked out by it.
Oh yeah, he'll be fine.
That's good. So you've also been in like musicals. You've been in like Phantom of the Opera and Man of La Mancha and things like that. Do performing on stage for a musical and preparing for that differ in any meaningful way from doing a standard play at all?
Well, it's like a heightened form of stage acting, because it's sort of unusual for someone to burst into song.
Yeah.
I mean, not for me per se, because I do it often when I'm just taking a walk by myself. But I go, oh, there's that guy again. There's that actor guy. But I took one of the things I did at Iowa was I took singing lessons and or singing classes, and because I always enjoyed singing, and even in chorus in junior high, and then different times in high school, I had the opportunity to sing something or other, and music growing up was important. I mean, I listened to Simon and Garfunkel, and of course Elvis and the Beatles, and I just always was moved by the power of music. Certainly, when I was growing up, it was more. I think had a little more audio stuff going on as opposed to all the screens today. We certainly didn't have cell phones and video games, and so music was more important, I think, to my generation. But I mean, not to shortchange this generation. I think the music is still happening, but yeah, doing a musical is a powerful experience, and the fact when I got to do this, we did a new version of Phantom of the Opera that we went to the Edinburgh Festival in Scotland.
Oh wow!
Yeah, but we got to this was like 1990, I think 1990. Yeah, I was doing a soap opera in New York, but I auditioned for this thing, and because I knew they were going to the Edinburgh Festival, which I'd heard about for years, but I was fascinated. I wanted to go. But they also toured England. We went to Bristol for a week, and then we were in Oxford, England for a week, and then we went up to the Edinburgh Festival for 2 weeks.
Nice.
And it was brand new. It was new music. It wasn't the Andrew Lloyd Webber one. It was something they'd been doing in Baltimore, Maryland at a dinner theater. But the music was...
They wrote new songs for it?
Well, this woman, yeah, she wrote this piece. I don't know if it was even prior to the Andrew Lloyd Webber one, but it was really beautiful music. I do a cabaret act every now and then, and I still do a song from that I think is particular. It's a ballad, particularly beautiful. And yeah, so that was a wonderful experience. And then you mentioned Man of La Mancha. That came along just a few years ago. It was a little theater up near me where I live in Los Angeles, and I auditioned and got cast as Don Quixote, just to be able to sing The Impossible Dream on stage. Was pretty amazing.
That sounds great.
What a thing to get cast as.
Well, I saw. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it. I saw Peter O'Toole do it on in the film, and he was amazing. And so I always wanted to do it I always admired Peter O'Toole. He's one of my favorite actors.
I mean, who didn't, right? he's one of the greats.
Oh God, yeah. Lawrence Arabia blew me away
for sure.
Yeah.
Speaking of the screen, you made a jump from the stage to the screen. What made you decide to do that, and what would you say was your big break with respect to your TV work?
Oh wow! Well, when I finished University of Iowa, it was a 2-year program, and like every actor, you have to decide whether you're going to New York or LA. That's pretty much the choices if you want to begin a career. And I didn't know anybody in New York, but I knew one guy in Los Angeles.
That was enough, huh?
Well, he was a guy a good friend that I went to Iowa with, and I only met him in Iowa, and we stayed friends. But he told me I could crash on his floor, so I drove my Chevy to the levee, and I drove it to Los Angeles, and from Kentucky, and I just hung up my shingle.
That's a bit of a trip right there.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I actually that was like 1979 when I came out here. So that was last year was my 40th year in showbiz. But
wow.
Yeah, I started doing theater right away just because there was a really good little company, and the cool thing was for sci-fi fans. They had been working with Ray Bradbury.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Who lived here, and he wrote his famous stuff. And the year before, like 78, they had done a stage version of The Martian Chronicles, which was a big hit. They actually moved it from this little theater to a bigger theater. And the year that I came, they were mounting Fahrenheit 451 on stage. And,
oh wow!
Yeah, it was. And so a buddy of mine and I, we auditioned, and we got cast as these walk-ons in Fahrenheit 451. We played these, weird little messenger guys that came in and said a few words and left. But I was just happy to be a part of it.
Right, it would be. Yeah, that's such a cool.
And I got to meet Ray Bradbury, which because he was around all the time and hanging out, because he wrote the piece for the stage as well. Sweet man. The fun fact was he never drove a car. This man who wrote about space travel and such, he never drove a car. He always, I don't know that he ever learned to drive a car, but just a sweet guy. And another little fun story was that literally 30 years later, I was in another Ray Bradbury play. And right before he passed, he did this Irish comedy called Falling Upward, because he actually wrote the screenplay to Moby Dick, the original Moby Dick on film. And I don't know if that's a common fact, but he did, and he spent time in Ireland, and he fell in love with the Irish people, and he wrote this really fun comedy called Falling Upward, and I was cast in as this very flamboyant character. It was a comedy, and I got to be funny, which was great. And I got to hang out with him again, and I reminded him, and he got a big kick out of the fact that I was in Fahrenheit 451 all those years ago.
That's really cool. That's really cool.
Yeah, that is pretty cool.
So then when you made your jump to the screen, you had some kind of role in almost every important soap opera, and I guess that began with Guiding Light. What are some of the comparisons and the contrast between being on the set of a soap opera compared to other film and TV sets that you've been on?
Wow, well, man, soap, your theater training pays off, because it's grueling. If you're doing an hour show, which Guiding Light was the first thing I did. I wasn't on there very long, and I didn't have a whole lot to do. I played this kind of walk-on character that didn't have a lot of scenes, but it was my first one. I just a little backstory. You guys know who Christian Slater is? The name Christian Slater.
Yes.
He's a pretty well known. He was for a while. I don't know if he's still doing much, but his mother,
not Mr. Robot, I think.
Well, his mother was Mary Jo Slater. She was a casting director for One Life to Live, which was another soap back in the day. There used to be 13 soap operas, and now there's like 4, I think, left.
Yeah.
Oh, General Hospital still going pretty strong.
Yeah, General Hospital, Young and the Restless, Bold and the Beautiful. I think they are alive. But no, it was a great training ground for young actors, just because you had to, you had to show up every day, know your lines, and hit your marks. And it was a great. I mean, I learned a lot doing it, and I'm glad I had the experience. But just to finish that story, I met Mary Jo she was auditioning out here for her soap opera, One Life to Live. And I met her, and she said, I think she liked me, but I didn't get that role, but she told me to stay in touch with her. And then when I was visiting New York, like a few months later, and I called her up, and she said, "Oh, I should introduce you to the other casting directors in town." And she got me around to meet them. And then the woman that cast Guiding Light ended up casting me on this smaller role there. And while I was doing Guiding Light, I got cast in a contract role on Another World, which was another old and venerated NBC soap opera, which we shot out in Brooklyn. And the Bill Cosby show was shooting in the other studio next to us. Wow. But I mean, on that show, I worked with Ray Liotta. I don't know if you
Oh yes.
Yeah, he's gone on to do quite a few great things.
Just a couple.
Just a few. But that was a great. I was on there about a year and a half. But yeah, if you're on an hour show, you have to learn, and you're in a hot storyline, you got to learn 10 or 20 pages of dialogue every night.
Oh, wow.
I think the most I ever had was 30 pages. Literally in every scene. I mean, it's not like sacred dialogue. You don't have to get every but you have to carry it. And whatever, in the old days, soap operas used to be live. That was what I found fascinating, because they came from radio. The original soaps were on radio, and
makes sense.
Those were live, but they were just sitting in front of microphones like we're doing our voiceover. But then when they went to television, they still maintained that sort of, they kept it going live because they didn't have a lot of editing capabilities, I suppose. But I did one soap opera called The Edge of Night.
Oh, wow.
A great title. And it was one of the it had been on radio for quite a while, and it went to television, and they still, actually I took over for a role on there for a guy who was in a car accident, but then he was in a heavy storyline, and I kind of jumped into that because the casting director knew me, and they still ran that show like it was live. They would count down the commercials. They'd say, "Oh, we're back from break in 5 minutes, 5 seconds, 5, 4, 3," and they'd point, and you go. And if you messed up, man, they hated that. They were like, "Oh," the stage manager go, "Yeah, the actor messed up. We have to start again." Sorry. That was interesting, I thought. Anyway.
So you, because you mentioned it's a little bit more grueling, it's a little bit more theatrical working on a soap opera set. Do you find the kind of atmosphere more or less enjoyable than what we call maybe a traditional set, like a TV or a movie set?
Well, again, because it's more akin. I think it's more akin to theater. You really learn to count on other people like you do on stage, and you kind of learn to, whatever happens, like on stage. And so it was, I really enjoyed the experience. The longest one I did was an ABC soap called Loving. That was, I was a lead on there for 2.5 years. And it was a great experience because, it was a half an hour show. Which was more like a 9 to 5 job, because your earliest call was like 8 in the morning, and then you were usually done by 4 or 4:30 in the afternoon. So you could go and hang out with your castmates, and we go and have dinner and go out, play pool or something, and have a drink. So it was more of a regular. You could have a life as opposed to an hour show where you were there 12 hours a day pretty much. And you went home and learned your lines and got up the next day and came back. But this, I really appreciated Loving, and I got to work with some really good people on that too.
Very nice.
Yeah.
I feel like I've got to ask this. I would be remiss if I didn't. Your first movie is very near and dear to my current city, Chattanooga Choo Choo. I have had many a event happen at the Choo Choo.
Okay.
How did the opportunity to take on film occur, and what was that experience like for you?
Well, I knew a really great casting director, amazing woman named Barbara Remsen. She was just one of these grand old dames of casting. I got to meet and work with a few of those over the years, and a lot of them came from acting themselves, so they carried themselves in a certain way, and they really appreciated actors. And I don't know if that still happens these days, but in the old days that was kind of common. But I had read for her, and she knew a manager I was working with at the time, and she was very favorable to his people, and I read for her for this role, and it was kind of the role of this con man who was pretending to be British, and they liked my British accent. I played a few Brits in my day, and so I got cast as this kind of con man who was riding on the Chattanooga Choo Choo. And George Kennedy, I got to work with him, who was, of course, a venerable old actor. I'd seen him do Cool Hand Luke with Paul Newman.
Oh, nice.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was, and Barbara Eden, of course, I grew up with her doing I Dream of Jeannie. And
yeah.
So, I mean, I was sort of I was starstruck by that cast. And just the fact that I got to be, and we got to use an actual railroad. We were actually on a train. And one of a little tidbit was we got to go. The character that George Kennedy was playing, he was kind of this eccentric millionaire, and he had this sort of rideable train in his backyard. And there was this we actually went to a place near Anaheim where this man, his name was Ward Kimball. He had this train in his backyard, and we went and were able to film there. And I was fascinated by him, and I was talking to him. And he was one of the original animators for Walt Disney.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they were called the Disney 10. They were like these 10 animators, and he was responsible for creating Jiminy Cricket.
Oh, wow.
He was fascinating to me. He said, well, I kept coming. He wanted a sketch of this cricket, and I kept coming in with these sketches of a cricket, and he'd say, he'd wad it up and throw it at me. He'd say, God damn it, Ward, it's got to be cute. He said, and he looked at me, he said, I don't know if you ever seen a cricket, but they're not cute. So he said, finally, I hit on the idea of putting him in a top hat and tails. And he said, well, Walt said, now you got it, Ward. That's what's great about my career. I think I've had the opportunity to meet some really fascinating people.
It sounds like
definitely
it.
Sounds like it.
Yeah. Anyway. That was a tidbit. Chattanooga Choo Choo was fun, and of course, it didn't open that many doors for me, but it was just fun to be part of.
Yeah,
it's still highly revered where I'm at right now. So,
well, there you are. You're from that. You're in Nashville.
I'm in Chattanooga.
Oh, you're in Chattanooga. Well, look at that.
Yeah.
And so sort of continuing along the film route of things, you've done work in other films such as Flags of Our Fathers and Changeling. Flags of Our Fathers is one of my favorite films of all time, actually, because I'm a big Clint Eastwood fan. What was it like working under the direction of Clint Eastwood?
Well, I mean, you're like coming into the presence of a god in Hollywood. I grew up, of course, with all of his films, and I definitely revered him. So the opportunity just to audition for him. I mean, he was in the room, but he says like very little. He's very much like the man with no name. He says not much. But I auditioned, and then he said a few words, and my agent called and said they want you to do this role. But again, these were very small roles. I had like 2 lines maybe at the most, and I know I think the first one I did was Flags of Our Fathers. Yeah, I played a reporter, and it was a period piece. You had to go in and get the wardrobe and the whole thing, but then. And it was, as I recall, it was more or less a kind of a crowd scene. And I think the guy that was on the set running the thing, because Clint kind of stays back. One of the things he never says action. I don't know if you ever heard that about him.
No, I never did.
Well, every other director I've ever worked with on television and film, they always, everything gets quiet and then they go action. And apparently what I've heard about Clint is when he did all those Westerns, he was most of the time sitting on a horse. And if the director screamed action, the horse would be startled. And so he always hated when a director said action. So he would come and he'd talk to you, and then he'd go sit in his chair and he'd just sit there and watch the monitor. The camera guy said to me, I looked at him and I said, is he going to tell me when to go? And he says, no, you go whenever you want to. I said, okay.
Huh.
Yeah, that apparently I'd heard that he works that way in every film. He never says action. He walks away, and whenever the actor's ready, he starts.
It's a lot more freeform than I was expecting.
Yeah, for real.
I bet that could get confusing on films that star him.
Well, that's all. I worked with him on that Flags of Our Fathers, and then Changeling. I got another small part as a truck driver in that, and
I'm gonna have to go back and watch both of them and see if I could pick you out now.
Well, I may have been on the cutting room floor. I'm not so sure, but anyway, it was just great to have been in his presence, shall we say?
Oh yeah. So you kind of talked about how you had those small parts. Do you recall what your first lead role in a film was and what that feeling was like for you?
Well, I think it was the same casting director, this wonderful lady, Barbara Remsen. That cast me in Chattanooga Choo Choo. There was this film called Countermeasures with an actor who was kind of a hot stuff at the time named Michael Dudikoff. You know that name?
I've heard it before.
Well, he was kind of the heartthrob back in the day. He was the lead. It was kind of a run silent, run deep submarine thing.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, he was a naval officer and he got captured. I played a Russian submarine commander named Captain Petrov, and yeah, I mean, he ended up being a prisoner on my. But I was the lead villain pretty much in the film, and he was basically trying to start World War III. This guy. I had a great line he said, "Call it nostalgia, but I do miss the Cold War." Anyway, it was a fun character, and that was pretty much the first lead I had in a film, and if not one of the only leads I had in a film.
I had an older sergeant who would say stuff like that unironically in my first Army unit.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man, I hope we're not going toward that direction these days. But we won't get into politics.
Sure.
No. It's hard. Yeah, it's hard to say. We'll stick away from that.
We'll stick with the acting here. On that, do you prefer TV to film, or is it the other way around?
Film, yeah, I haven't had a lot of experience in film. I mean, television is pretty much. I mean, primetime television is pretty much run. I mean, they use film cameras for the most part, and so it's very similar to film. It's just a little faster pace.
Sure. Is the prepping for one significantly different than the other, or
not as an actor? I mean, again, I haven't been a major lead in a film or like in a big release, wide release film as a big role. I've had certainly more experience doing primetime guest star leads, but and especially the Star Trek stuff I did. I guested in all the major Star Trek series, and those of course were fun. And
sure.
And then when I did, I don't know if you guys know about this Zorro series I did.
Yep.
It was called the New Zorro. We shot it in Madrid, Spain, back in like '92, and I got to spend a month in Madrid, wow. Yeah, that was all. It was a British director, and they really shot that like little movies. Every episode, I did like 4 episodes. I was playing Zorro's evil twin brother.
Yeah.
And an actor named Duncan Regehr. He was Zorro. Apparently, the story I heard was that Disney owned the rights to Zorro for many years. Because I grew up watching that old Guy Williams Zorro it was black and white on television back in the day. And I think they let the rights lapse for like a millisecond, and these two producers, snapped it up, and I think Disney was really pissed off about it, but they couldn't do anything for a while, and they were shooting this series called The New Zorro in Spain in the early '90s, I guess, and I was just great to have the experience, and got to ride horses and have sword fights, and
sure.
Oh, and another interesting little tidbit. My second in command, fresh out of drama school, was a young actor named Daniel Craig.
Really?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
We hung out for a couple of weeks in Madrid. He was a funny guy. I would love to run across him again just to see if he remembers me.
Sure.
His highfalutin status now, Mr. Bond.
Mr. Bond, yeah.
We were hanging out in Madrid back in '92.
That sounds like how a James Bond movie would start.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you mentioned Star Trek, and my girlfriend loves Star Trek, so I know she'd be mad at me if I didn't ask this. But I in a little bit of research that we've done, you've had parts in all four, not all four, but 4 different Star Trek series. What was it like, sort of making that jump from things that were grounded in reality to science fiction? And did you prefer one or the other?
Well, I grew up with classic Trek, and that series is still, I think it still stands up as like an amazingly written sci-fi series. I mean, I'm amazed that I have a 13-year-old son, and he binge watches it, the classic Trek.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, and of course, my wife's a big Trek fan too, and so we find ourselves, like when he's binge watching, we find ourselves in there watching it too. Oh, I remember this episode. Oh, yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah, they had Roddenberry. Gene Roddenberry, who created, he hired a lot of the best sci-fi writers of the time to write these scripts, and that's why they hold up, I think, is because they're so well written, and in addition to being well acted, I think the acting still holds up, whatever you think about William Shatner being over the top sometimes. But I mean, Nimoy, the cast was amazing. And another little tidbit, I read, you talk about reading for Clint Eastwood, I read for Shatner was cast. He was directing a movie that I read for. I can't remember which one it was. I didn't get it, but I remember in the room reading for him and meeting him, and also Leonard Nimoy. I read for him for a film. Of course, he became pretty well known director. And I can't remember what I was reading for him, but he was having auditions in his living room in his house. And
wow!
I got to go there one day and audition for him in his house. But needless to say, I was fascinated by those guys and had a lot of respect for them. And so when Paramount, of course, had the rights, and they were auditioning back in the early, I guess it was early 92, around then 93, when I got cast as, and I did a Next Generation. And yeah, I had such a respect for the form. I was so happy to be a part of it. The first role was this. That's the other thing. My first role was an alien, and when you sit in a makeup chair for 3 hours and get that stuff glued to your face and right up to your lips and right up to your eyes, and it's this amazing state-of-the-art foam. Back in the day, I think this famous makeup man named Michael Westmore. He was from a makeup family that had a long history in Hollywood, the Westmore family. But he was like a kid in a candy store. He had this book of like lizards that it's Encyclopedia of Lizards, and he would have it open in the makeup room. And if you look at the Trek makeup, a lot of it is kind of lizard-like.
Yeah.
Yeah. He would try mixing up different things like iguanas and whatever, and he would come up with these designs for makeup, and then literally you'd sit in that chair for 3 hours. Was like the least amount of time I ever sat in a makeup chair for a Trek alien. And you wake up and you go, oh, okay, that's what I look like, huh?
I can imagine that being somewhat startling.
Well, it really gives you the character, though. I mean, that's the other thing of theater training is you go from kind of the outside in, and you see what kind of character you're playing by what's on the written page, and you create a character from that. But the good thing about this is, and you go back even to the roots of theater, like Commedia dell'arte in Italy. They wore masks, and even in the Greek tragedies, they wore masks. So it's and the mask represented what the character was about. And so that's why I look at the Trek stuff or anything I've ever done with prosthetics as it's wearing a mask. And so that's why it harks back to the roots of theater. So I enjoy it. And once they realize you can act with that schmutz on your face, they hire you again. So I was able to do I did 3 aliens on the Trek stuff over the years, a different series. And they let me be a human once. On Next Generation, I played a lieutenant on the bridge, Lieutenant Barnaby. And
just a total aside, it's almost like on cue. You mentioned the lizard makeup, and a lizard is actually sitting on my window right now. So I think he's listening in.
Now,
his ears were burning.
What kind of lizard? What kind of lizard is out there?
Oh, just one of the tiny ones. I'm working in the Caribbean right now, so they're all over the place.
Wow, interesting. Okay, well.
So you worked in, again, so you worked in Next Generation, you worked on Voyager, Deep Space Nine, and Enterprise, and you played the different characters each time. Obviously, do you have a favorite one that you've played?
Well, I think the character on Deep Space Nine, it was a Jem'Hadar, which was this warrior race. For people who are familiar with the Trek lore, and
yes.
They were bred to be warriors, and they didn't, they lived from a sense of just being, I guess, violent. And so the episode I did, they had captured Worf, who was of course a Klingon, and the Klingons are well known as being warriors as well. And he was the character I played was a commander. His name was Ikati Ka, and he was staging these gladiatorial battles between the Klingon, Michael Dorn, playing the Klingon, and his people, like the Jem'Hadar, and Dorn, he had this sense of honor as a warrior too, and he would defeat these guys, or he would be beaten down, and time after time, and so my character became so impressed by his honor, I suppose, and his warrior's status, this guy that was leading the Jem'Hadar, he said, by the time of the end of the series, end of the show, he said, well, you have to kill this guy. And my character said, I can't kill this Klingon. I can't defeat this Klingon. All I can do is kill him. And he said, that no longer holds my interest. And so his own people destroyed him. But, it was just an interesting character to play, who had that sense of honor that, rather than kill a worthy adversary, he chose to die himself.
Sure. So, being that attached to the Star Trek fandom, is it true that you actually met your wife at a Star Trek convention?
Hang on, is she here? No, okay. No, it's fine. No, I tell people this. Yeah, I had done Star Trek conventions in the United States all over, and it's always fun to do those and meet the fans. And then a friend of mine, Barbara Luna, if you know that name, she did classic Trek, and she said she had gone to this Italian convention, and said, they treated her well, and they fed you really well. So I'd never been. Actually, I had been to Italy. This was the other little side note. That soap opera that I did called Loving, that I mentioned earlier. Mm-hmm. I did that. The longest was 2.5 years, and it was very popular in Italy. In Italy, it was called Quando si ama, which means when we love. And, it was very popular, and actually, I found out later that the woman who became my wife, she watched it when she was younger, and so I had gone on like a PR trip to Rome when I was doing the soap, like back in '91, and I went with this Italian organizer, and the girl that played my daughter on the show, she came with me, and wow, that was my really 15 minutes of fame, because it was like being a rock star in Rome. I had bodyguards walking down the street. That's how trippy that was.
Great place to be a rock star in, I would say.
Well, everybody, once they recognized you, they wanted an autograph. So that was like, oh man, I had my taste of what it feels like to be like a movie star.
Sure.
Yeah, it was fascinating, and I had these two guys with me who would, keep people away. And I don't know that I'd want a steady diet of that, to tell you the truth. But it was fun for a time, and I had a great time in Rome. But then, skipping ahead, when this after I'd done the Star Trek stuff, and this friend of mine said, "Oh, you should really go to this Italian convention. They have it every year." in a place called Bellaria, which is on the Mediterranean coast. And so I got myself there, and she said, you have to get yourself there. They don't fly you in, but once you're there, they put you up and they feed you really well. I said, oh, well, that's enough for me.
Right.
So I showed up, and there was a 4-day convention, and you need to have a translator when you're in Italy, because not many Italians speak English. It's not like Germany especially, English is taught as a general rule. A lot of Germans speak English, not so much in Italy. So all of the stars that, the people, the guest stars or whatever that come there, they need a translator sitting at their table. So my translator was this lovely lady named Stefania, and she sat next to me for 4 days, and I like to say I was smitten. I behaved myself until the last night we were there. We had a party, going away party, and I invited her to come for a walk on the beach with me. And I don't know, man, one thing led to another.
Sure.
She, we kind of said, where's it going to go from here? And, she traveled quite a bit in those days, and she would, every year she'd go someplace else. She'd been to Mexico. She'd been to Sri Lanka. Every year she'd go with friends of hers, different places. And she was happening the next month. That was in May where I met her. And in June, she was going to go to Ireland. She'd never been to Ireland. I said, oh, baby, that's my country, because my heritage is Irish. My father's parents were from Ireland. And I'd been before a couple of times just to investigate my heritage. And so I flew to Dublin, and I met her there, and I stole her away from her friends. And we explored Ireland. I showed her Ireland, and I like to say we fell in love in Ireland, and as you do. And then she came to visit me here a couple of times, and I proposed in the kitchen floor. I got down on one knee and offered her. I said, would you marry me? And so 15 years it's going to be this year. And
congratulations.
Congratulations.
Congratulations, sir.
13-year-old beautiful boy to show for it. And she takes him back every year to see. She's an only child, and this, of course, is our only child. And she takes him back every year for a month to visit her parents in Italy, and he's fluent in Italian already.
That's great.
Yeah, no, it's really turned out fabulous, and I'm very grateful. And Star Trek brought us together.
Exactly.
That's awesome.
Star Trek Star Trek is all about like unity and stuff like that, right? Like that's one of the main themes of it. So
like I said, I'm fascinated by the fact that my kid kind of surfed into these old episodes of Trek, and he's fascinated by them. And I said, man, I was your age watching this.
Well,
that's excellent, though.
And I texted my girlfriend earlier that we were going to be talking to you, and she just texted me back a picture of you in all your lizard makeup. And I got to say that looks like a lot of stuff that it must have been difficult to work with.
Well, it certainly was. But I think that actually the Jem'Hadar, that was a 4-hour makeup, because my makeup call was 3 a.m. for a 7 a.m. set call. And I mean, I literally had got like 2 hours of sleep, and I showed up in the makeup chair at Paramount, and I literally fell asleep in the chair while they were putting this stuff on my face. And that was one where I woke up and I looked in the mirror. I went, "Whoa, okay."
Scare yourself.
But the most recent, I don't know if you guys know, I did an episode of The Orville, Seth MacFarlane's new series, and that was, I guess, a couple of years ago now. But he's a Trek fan, and I had read for. He's in the room when you read for the show. He's one of the, if not the executive producer, he's one of the producers. But we talked several times about the fact that he knew my Trek work, which was fun. And then I ended up getting this makeup role on one of the episodes of The Orville a couple of years ago, and I was playing this alien priest character, which was another 3-hour makeup in the chair there. It over in 20th Century Fox. But the interesting part was that he and Scott Grimes, who plays the other, my second in command on the show, they both had to get the same makeup on because it was an episode where they were sort of infiltrating this alien race called the Krill. And so all three of us had to be in the makeup chair at the same time. Splits on our face. And I think he had a new appreciation for the makeup chair after that.
I bet anybody would.
That's awesome. So we followed your career so far from the stage to the small screen to the big screen, and then you made the jump to the home screen with video games, and you made the jump to voice acting with Baldur's Gate 2, which I personally haven't played, but having gone through your IMDb page, I have heard your voice a lot, apparently.
Okay. I had to go back over my IMDb page too myself to go refresh my memory.
We're curious to know what got you down the path of voice acting, on top of everything else that you've done.
Well, I guess people had told me for years that you have a good voice, and I thought that went along with the acting gig,
Sure.
Because I had training going back to University of Iowa. I had voice class and singing class, and I always enjoyed singing as well. But I always thought voiceover was something you did when you retired.
That sentiment has been said to us before a couple times, actually.
Well, because I literally didn't know anybody who did voiceover. I just thought it was, again, when you can't act anymore, you go into a studio and nobody cares what you look like, and you just you voice act. But little did I realize that what an interesting craft it was to create characters just with your voice. And I auditioned for this voice agent who became my agent for like 22 years. A woman named Sandy Schnarr, fabulous lady, and she had her own agency. And I, back in those days, nobody had a booth in their house, which is very common these days. Everybody has a booth in their house. So the competition has certainly increased as far as auditions go. Everybody's submitting auditions from all over the United States practically. And if you got a booth in your basement or in your closet, you can record an audition. But back when I started, you had to go either into your agent's office or to a casting office and record in a studio. And I really preferred that because you got directed by a booth operator, and they would record you and edit it themselves before they submitted it. Whereas these days, I have a booth in my basement, and I record auditions almost on a daily basis still, where you have to record it, edit it yourself, and then submit it. It's just it's a lot of work, frankly. But I started working through this agent, and she sent me out on a lot of things, and video games were kind of in their infancy, I suppose, and they weren't nearly as popular, I suppose they are now. But I'd never played video games, and I know, forgive me, but I still don't play video games. But I enjoy creating. I've always enjoyed creating characters for whatever I'm doing. From some stage to film to primetime television, whatever you're doing. That's always been the joy of acting to me is creating a character and making it believable and real. So it's a real challenge, I think, to take a script and create a character just with your voice. So. That's always been. It still interests me. I'm not bored by it. I'm still challenged by it. So I segued, I guess, naturally into these characters for video games, and I guess I've done about 80 or more video games now.
You've done a lot of really awesome stuff.
Yeah. Do you find it easier or harder to craft your character when you're doing voice acting as opposed to performing live?
Well, of course, you're limited by just your voice, but I find that the voice is also a big part of doing anything with your body as well, because whether it be an accent or where the character's from the South, the North, I've always been interested in doing dialects correctly as well.
Sure.
So it's always been, it's still, I just think the voice is a big part of anything you do. So it wasn't a big stretch to not have the body involved and just do the voice. So, it still fascinates me, like I say.
Nice.
Now, so like you said, you do auditions on almost a daily basis now. When you actually land a role, that like a larger role, is it hard to divorce yourself from the character once you're spending so much time doing their voice? Or is it easy for you to sort of turn the character off and go back to being James once you hit end record?
Well, a voiceover is certainly, it's easier to divorce yourself from the character when you're embodying the character, especially on stage night after night. If you're repeating that performance, which theater is all about. It's about recreating the experience over and over for a new audience. And I find that a little harder to let go of sometimes, especially I mentioned this one-man piece that I've done over the years. And, it takes place in a jail cell, and he's actually committed a murder, is why he's in the cell, and he's telling his story to the audience. That's always, once you embody that piece, it's sometimes it's hard to let it go. And, I have to explain it to my wife. Sometimes it's like, I kind of have to be in my space for a little while and decompress. And I'm sure that's true of a lot of actors, especially if you're in a film where you're playing a bad guy. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this series called Bosch. It's on Netflix, right? I think it's Netflix. But this actor named Titus Welliver, he plays this detective named Bosch. And man, my wife, she turned me on to it, but we've been binge watching that. And man, this guy, he's an amazing actor. I guess he did Sons of Anarchy and a couple of other things, but just a really intense, interesting guy. But this character he's playing is like, man, I can't imagine that he lets that go very easily because it's so, when you create that sort of character with a really intense past where you've been hurt and you explain why you were there, and it's just embodying that. That to me, just to go back to the whole philosophy of acting, that's what's always been fascinating to me, is that there's one of the quintessential books about acting was written by this a Russian theater guy named Konstantin Stanislavski. And I'm sure people have heard of the Stanislavski method. Mm-hmm. And in New York, it was called The Method. And, Marlon Brando was one of the first sort of big famous examples of the acting method. And it was sort of like becoming the character, where the actor became the character. And so
sure.
You couldn't differentiate between where the actor ended and the character began. But it's an interesting piece. It's, interesting book. I think it's, I've forgotten exactly the name, but I think it's called To the Actor or something like that. Or the Method. It's, but he talked about, actors should be almost like priests. They're priests of truth and beauty. And that's always been very, very sacred to me. It's like when you're entrusted with a role, you create it to the best of your ability, and it is your craft, Kobe Bryant, who unfortunately passed yesterday, which everybody, of course, knows about by now. But I was listening to an interview of him where he said, his career as a basketball player, where that was his craft. But he said after that's over, you can because championships come and go and glory comes and goes. But he said what you pass on to your legacy is what you pass on to other generations, and that hit me hard, because
sure.
actors, I think too, it's your craft that's important, but ultimately it's what you pass on to other generations as a teacher or a coach or whatever you do. But
sure.
Anyway, neither here nor there, but I just, I was totally blown away by that news, of course, as many of us were.
Oh, yeah.
Shame.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
It is. And God rest his soul and be with his family.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. You ready to jump into Metal Gear, James?
I am.
All right, let's do it.
With each change, I changed too. My thoughts, personality, how I saw right and wrong. War changed me. And not only my visage. Words can kill.
I had to, believe me, I have to preface this by saying, I never played the game.
Sure.
I did talk to a neighbor of mine who is a real video gamer. He turned me on to a couple of websites that had like a history of who Skullface was, and also there were like 45 minutes of all of his scenes, because this was about 5 years ago at least that I
about 5 years ago, yeah.
Yeah, and man, there's been a lot that went on between now and then, but
sure has.
so I just had to, I had to refresh myself. But a fascinating character. Even watching the scenes, and I guess this creator is, what is his name again? Hideo
Kojima.
Yeah, what an interesting world he created there.
I will say I've heard your "I was born in a small village" monologue at least 100 times.
Well, there you are.
Because it's probably my favorite trailer out of the entire series that was part of.
Yeah, and I was. It was interesting. I got a Facebook thing from this guy in France, in this small village, a place in France, I suppose. But he was a big Skullface fan, Metal Gear Solid fan, and he actually sculpted these little sculptures of different characters that he liked, and he sent me this amazingly crafted sculpture of Skullface that he hand painted, and he sent me a picture of it. He said, "What do you think about this?" I said, "Wow." Because he did this for other movies and other things he did, but he was this sculptor, and amazing. And then of course I've seen other stills of Skullface, but as to why, as the background of how he got burned and all that stuff, I really had to go and refresh myself today, and just to see the work. I thought it was good stuff.
Do you recall what led you to Metal Gear and like playing Skullface in the first place?
Well, again, it's like every day you get sent by your agent characters in a lot of video games.
Mm-hmm.
Especially 5 years ago when I was working steadily with this agent, I got different things, and you get the character, you hear the breakdown of who it is, where it came from, and you try to embody that as best you can in a voice. And
sure,
I guess I gave it a shot in the audition, and then I got hired. So, and then you guys have had an interview with Presume Ehrman, right?
Yes, we have. Yes,
yeah, and she's the one that told me about you guys, and so. No, she's a great casting director, and she was fun to work with on this show, and
sure.
yeah. So it was just you come in, you show up, and you do the lines, and then you get coaching, and the director directs you different ways, and you do every line several times, I'm sure, and they decide what they want, they pick and choose. So it's kind of out of your hands. You give maybe 3 or 4 takes on every line or a monologue or whatever you do.
So when they brought Skullface to you, like how is he presented to you? Like what kind of energy did you have to bring when you were portraying him?
Well, again, I probably read a character breakdown of who he was and where he came from. Maybe there was a sketch. sometimes there's not even a sketch if it's kind of hush hush, you know, they don't want to. So I don't, again, I just probably busted out. Yeah, you're presented with basically a character breakdown and maybe a sketch, maybe not. So I can't remember if I saw a sketch of this guy or not. But as I said, I play a lot of bad guys in my day. So, and I have that sort of, deeper register to my voice that has lent itself to bad guys. And I think I just, I busted out what I think they might have wanted. So obviously it was something that they liked, and I ended up getting cast, which was fun. It was probably several sessions. I think there were several variations of the game that Skullface appeared in, right? Or was it just?
Yeah, he was in a shorter kind of like prequel called Ground Zeroes, and he was a big player in 5. Yeah.
Yeah, and again, I just in watching it again today, I went, oh, I vaguely remembered some of that stuff, but. Again, I can't say as I remember exactly what it was like to create that role.
So my only question on if you remember any specific thing was, and it's probably my favorite line just because it's so over the top, is when you go, "Who has such a lust for power? Who?" Like just yelling it at the top of your lungs.
And if I'd been able to say Donald Trump, I would have done it. There we go. But not in those days.
Oh, no, that was a little beforehand.
No politics, guys.
No politics.
Again, I don't remember, to tell you the truth. It's just been too long, and too many things have come and gone between now and then.
No. I understand. I just in preparation and sort of, I was listening to some of the Skullface monologues while I was at work today and all that, and that one came across. I was like, I need to ask him about that part.
Well, it's like I was looking at the video today, and I went, "Well, why did he wear a mask? What was the point of the mask when you have that kind of face anyway?"
You want to know the funny thing is, we ask that question to ourselves all the time.
Okay.
I mean, it's kind of like a Zorro mask, so maybe it's like an homage to you. I don't know.
Yeah, it kind of. I mean, I don't know. Well, even the badge and the way he dressed with the tie and the hat, it just. I don't know if it was ever explained. Did he have a fascination for a certain Western thing or?
There's a lot of characters in these games that have the sort of that Western motif, and because Hideo Kojima. As he's sort of developed the Metal Gear series, he's gotten more bombastic and over the top.
Okay.
I mean, so obviously you said you remember tidbits, and you've had to sort of refresh yourself on it as well. But do you remember, like, was there anything that stood out about playing this sort of like grandiose character with these giant aspirations to basically plan and take over the world and control the world and the flow of information? Do you remember any of that?
Well, I mean, certainly hearing the lines, I remember vaguely recording that stuff, and there were, you probably do it several different ways, and then they choose whichever way you want to do it. If you're too over the top, they rein you back and they say, can you lower that a little bit, or can you give me more on that? That's just sort of the way voice acting is. Even the animated series, I've done a couple of animated series. We haven't touched on that, but it's the same way you're all together in a room, and everybody listens to the other actors doing their deal, and that's fascinating too. I did Starship Troopers was the first animated series I did, and then I did Transformers Prime was the other one I did, and we haven't really touched on that, of course. But
you were in the Starship Troopers animated series.
Yeah, I played a character in that named Doc. He was kind of.
You played Doc?
I did.
That's incredible.
Yeah, I was playing a black guy.
I had a similar reaction when I found out that you were
politically correct. That is, but no, I mean, I think when I auditioned for him, I didn't know he was black, but he was the medic on the team, and they.
I remember Doc. That's amazing.
Yeah, I think they wanted kind of a voice like this, and so they wanted. I guess I went there, and I thought it was a well done series. It was really.
It was fantastic. It was a travesty that it didn't get to end properly.
Yeah, it didn't last that long. I mean, but for that matter, Transformers didn't go that long either. This last Transformers.
I had a very similar reaction to Zach realizing that you were in Starship Troopers as finding out you were Wheeljack in Transformers. Well, I really love Transformers.
I apologize for geeking out a little bit right there, but that was totally unexpected.
Oh yeah, it was fun. I worked with really great people. Reno Romano, if you know that name, he was one of the leads. E.G. Daly. It was some really good people were in that show, and David DeLuise, Dom DeLuise's son. The great thing about doing an animated series, you're all in the same room together, so you really get to see how other actors work, which is rare in voiceover because you're often in a booth isolated by yourself. And I always find it fascinating, going back to theater, you see people, you're always together on stage, and when you're together in a big room, everybody recording scenes together, you see how different people approach their characters. And especially Transformers Prime, I got to work with Peter Cullen, who plays Optimus Prime. He does Optimus, the voice of Optimus, and he's this little guy that his voice comes out of. and Frank Welker, who did Megatron, and Steve Bloom, he did Starscream. I mean, these are voiceover legends, really. Bloom goes from like one animated series to another. He actually, you know the name Steve Bloom?
Yes.
Oh yeah, of course.
Done a ton of stuff, but when I did this one man show recently, back in October last year, I invited him to come, and he actually came. He showed up one night, and man, he was so complimentary afterwards, because I don't think he comes from a theater background. I know he doesn't do much on camera, but he would say, "Wow, it was so amazing to see you like doing your craft in your avenue of expression." Anyway, but it was great to be able to work with these great people. I'd love to do another animated series. Like I said, I've only done 2, but it would be fun to do another one.
Yeah. So speaking about working with great people, we spoke to Chris Zimmerman Salter on the show, who got us in touch with you in the first place. What was it like working under her direction with the other people that were working with you on Metal Gear Solid?
Again, it's hard to remember exactly, but I mean, I just have the greatest respect for Chris. She's a really great casting director and director, and she's just a lot of fun to be around. And it was I was so happy she contacted me about this, because she said she had a great time being interviewed by you guys, and it's certainly been a lot of fun talking here tonight.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. Sorry, I just want to rub it back in to Metal Gear. The Skullface didn't have a lot of on-screen moments, but the ones that he had were extremely impactful, especially for me. And a lot of audio logs in the game dig into his background. Do you recall how long the process was for recording all those lines?
Boy, I really don't, but I think it's similar in a lot of video games. I mean, that was probably one of the longest characters, or largest roles I've done, because I mean, I watched a 45-minute YouTube thing about all of his scenes put together, because just to refresh my memory, I went, "Whoa, okay." He talked a lot.
Yeah.
Well, there's probably even more that you didn't see, because there's like a lot of tapes you can listen to while you're playing as well that feature him as well. So it's probably way longer too.
Oh, okay. Well,
yes.
Again, my neighbor, he said he played a lot of Metal Gear, so I was kind of tapping his brain about it. But he referred me to this YouTube stuff where I was able to actually refresh my memory of the lines. But like I say, it was probably one of the longest roles in video games I've ever done.
Sure.
Because I one of the fun facts that my wife wanted me to mention was that before Benedict Cumberbatch did Smaug in The Hobbit, I was the voice of Smaug in The Hobbit.
Wait, really?
In 2003, I did Smaug, and in the video game of The Hobbit, and I was also Doctor Strange in 2 video games for Marvel.
Oh, I see. So we're
before that Cumberbatch guy.
Yeah. So what we're saying is we're gonna get you into a throwdown with Benedict Cumberbatch.
That's okay. I just saw. Did you guys see the movie 1917?
Yes.
Yes.
I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, I hadn't seen him for a while, but it was interesting to see Cumberbatch make an appearance in that. But wow, what an amazing film that was. I was really blown away by it.
Oh, man.
Anyway, I didn't want to take away from Metal Gear. I just thought...
No. I'm still kind of blown away that you played Smaug in The Hobbit. Sorry, like Zach had his moment now. Now I'm kind of freaking out.
One more, I was also the voice of Scar in Kingdom Hearts.
Yeah, in Kingdom Hearts.
I did Jeremy Irons, of course. I was that role.
Oh, my God.
And Jeremy Irons was in the Starship Troopers movie. Anyway.
Well, there you go.
Tying it all back together.
I'll tell you another little side note. I often get called on to do like a Sam Elliott voice, right? Because I can boast out that Sam Elliott thing because I'm from the South and I got that. I can get that vibe. So years ago, I was at a party, like a PR kind of a thing, and Sam Elliott was there with his wife, Catherine Ross, and I just so happened to be near him, and I kind of chatted with him a little bit, and he's very down to earth. I said, Sam, when they can't afford you, I do your voice. Got a big kick out of that.
That's phenomenal.
Wow, that's amazing. So we've talked about your performance with Skullface and how he was this sort of like over the top, bombastic, grandiose plans to take over the world. And now you've gone through and refreshed your memory with him. And you've said that he was sort of like the longest and largest character you ever had to play for a video game. Is there anything you would have changed about the performance in hindsight? Or do you feel that, him as a character and all your characters, once you hit that final line, you hit end and that character is done, do you feel they're complete?
Well, I do. I feel like if you have a good director, you're pretty much exhausted because you do things. Often you want to do things different ways, or they ask you to do things different ways, or with a little different flavor on a line, or a different twist, or volume, or intensity. And so you cover every line or a monologue, say, in different ways, and then it's up to them to choose which one they do. And then I hadn't revisited this character in a while, and so just to watch it, I went, I bought it. I thought it was an interesting character.
Well, he definitely was.
Yeah, and
Sure.
I can pretty much say that about most of the things I've done, even on camera or video games. I feel like that work stands up, and I'm happy with it. I don't wish I'd done this or wish I'd done that. I feel pretty good about it, and that's what the great thing about stage is you get to redo it every night. And if you didn't quite get it one night, you maybe try something different another night. But the thing about voiceover and on camera as well, you pretty much, once you rehearse it, and then you shoot it, it's there, and it's there for posterity. And so you're either happy with it. I'm sure there are actors who aren't happy with their work and would have done something differently. But I really don't have any regrets about a lot of what I've seen or heard of what I've done.
That's good. So to kind of wrap up a little bit, Skullface himself, as you probably saw during your refresher, kind of wrapped up his story in a particularly grisly way, I guess I'd say.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah. Do you recall what it was like to perform such a violent end for this character at all, or what that process is like?
Well, I bought the farm in various ways over the years, shall we say? Yeah, I mean that was pretty intense. He was like that guy was the snake was like shooting pieces of him off, weren't they? There.
Oh yeah, no,
Yeah.
it was pretty
Oh
brutal.
yeah. And finally, it was that other guy that came up and finished him off. Finally, but no, it was yeah. Again, in a voice booth, you're saying, okay, they're telling you, oh, okay, you just got your leg shot off, you just got this shot, so they give you do a various ways of reacting in pain, and so they pick and choose what they want, but at the end of it, or you do various ways of saying, kill me. And they choose so it's out of your hands to a degree. You just give them a lot of variations. So, when it's on camera, it's different. I did an episode of Highlander. If you guys know that series, there was, it was, I guess I've done Highlander conventions, different parts of the world too. When that character was pretty popular, I suppose. I played a character named Grayson, who was supposed to be like a 4,000-year-old immortal, and I had this massive sword fight with the main character when we shot it up in Vancouver quite a while ago. But he had to die too. He had his head cut off at the end. So it's like, again, it's just the villain usually dies in some way at the hands of the hero. So as I said, I've played quite a few villains, so I've died in various ways over the years. But no, the Metal Gear Solid character was certainly an interesting character, and it was interesting to watch him meet his demise.
Great.
Well, James, I think that about does it for us. Thank you so much for taking the time out to join us today.
My pleasure.
So they can find you. Your website is jameshoran.com, correct?
Yeah, it's in desperate need of revamping, and it is on the list to do. I do want to redo that, but there's some reels of stuff I've done over the years. But it's there, yes.
Is there anything that you'd like to tell our listeners about, where they can find you, or anything that you're allowed to tell us about maybe what you're doing next, or anything of that nature?
Well, there is a revamp of a pretty well-known franchise that I'm not allowed to talk about, but that's all I'll say. It is on the horizon. So. Yeah, and I don't know when exactly that's coming out, but I am under NDA on that one, so I can't say much about that. But we didn't talk about. I did a Love, Death, and Robots. I think it's called Love.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. Anyway, that was a lot of fun. That was like a motion capture thing we did, and I got to work with. I think his name Tim Miller and David Fincher. They were really fabulous. I mean, I thought the series, the animation on that was really well done, because it was that mocap thing. So it was my first experience really with mocap, where you wear all those little electromagnetic things on your face, and so the character ends up looking like you. So it's really embodies both on camera and the voiceover aspects of it. But I'd love to do another one of those, but I unfortunately don't have another one on the horizon. But yeah, the video, this other thing that's coming out is basically what I've worked on most recently. Yeah, that's pretty much.
And you all should definitely watch Love, Death, and Robots as well. It's fantastic. It's on Netflix.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, it was fun. I got to see it. Boy, that would be an interesting. The episode was called Shapeshifters. It was about soldiers who were became werewolves.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
that would be an interesting live action series. I think. It'd be fun to see a little more of that.
So before we go, sir, we have a way that we wrap up the show typically. which is we mention that we say the phrase "it's just a box," which is a callback to the original Metal Gear Solid game. And I was wondering if we could get Skullface to say "it's just a box" for us.
Okay. You ready?
Absolutely, yeah.
It's just a box.
Just a box.